For the first part of our webcast, we are going to discuss the background and dynamics of the mining boom in Mongolia. During this part, Byambabaatar will be our main speaker. In the second part, we will turn to the Belt and Road Initiative, its links to mining and its environmental effects, and we will also ask big questions about the future. In this part of the webcast, we will be joined by Beibei. Mongolia is a country of vast expanses, endless green steppe and sheer blue sky, from the Gobi Desert in the south, where fossilized dinosaur eggs were first uncovered in 1923, to snow-clad Altai Mountains in the west and forests in the north. The country is also blessed with the world's second largest population of snow leopard. There are musk deer, goby birds, and many other protected or endangered species, not to mention bactrian camels, Kashmir goats, and thousands of domesticated horses, which are the basis of Mongolian pastoralists' economic survival. But Mongolia is also home to a booming mining industry. In 2011, the international community was electrified to discover that this remote steppe country has an economic growth of 17%. Mongolia is also lucky in its geopolitical position, being landlocked between two powerful neighbors, Russia and China. Today, we will touch upon these three topics: mining, the environment, and the challenges and opportunities brought by the special geopolitical position. Byambabaatar, let's start with the basics. Why is mining important for Mongolia? What is the relation between mining and Mongolia's transition from communism to democracy?
Well, thank you, Emilia. Before answering your question, I'd like to focus on three issues. First, the extractive sector is not new to post-socialist Mongolia. Massive investment was made in geology, prospecting over 7,000 mineral occurrences and estimated 800 mineral deposits by the late 1980s. Joint mining ventures were established and exported mineral resources to former socialist countries under Comecon economic integration. Second, mining towns, along with the infrastructure, social service, apartments, kindergartens, were planned and developed rather than building mining camps of fly-in, fly-out management. That's why mining was often included in the industrial sector during socialist time. Third, as the economy shifted from centrally planned to market economy, the demand for mineral export at the international market was high and constant compared to other sectors such as agriculture. For example, Mongolia's copper mine, Irtnet, operated since 1978 without any disruption, and it contributed to budget over 10%. These mindsets drove Mongolia to intensify mining sector after 1991. The government initiated an economic program called Gold in hope to increase budget revenue from mining sector. If you look diagram, Mongolia's economy was chaotic in 1990s, and it reached its 1990 level by 2005 after 15 years. During this period, whole economic regime changed, leading to inequalities and emergence of private mining in parallel with state-owned joint venture. In the past 15 years, most significant mining projects started following commodity price fluctuations. The good news is that Mongolian economy has expanded over 5 times compared to 1990, and it is beginning to diversify. But this non-mining economic growth is made by external debts, mainly sovereign bonds and private sector loans. In the second diagram, Mongolia's mineral production is compared to Russia and China. All minerals Mongolia produced are exported in raw, unprocessed, mainly to China. It was Soviet Union during socialist time. Mongolia is still discussing to build industrial complexes, smelters, to create more added values, employment, and more benefits.
In the early 1990s, Mongolia was known for its liberal policy around granting mining licenses. Another mining liberal country was Kyrgyzstan. Some critics argue that Mongolia licensed 42% of its territory. After this period of having an enthusiastic open-door policy, the government made a U-turn and in 2006 introduced a so-called windfall profit tax on gold and copper, the highest in the world at the exorbitant level of 68%. Why do governments, and the Mongolian government in particular, make such swings?
Well, good question. Thank you. First of all, windfall tax is common practice in the world. UK, USA, Australia, China, Russia, and many other countries. The question is how these were distributed. Is it saved in the Economic Stabilization Fund or opportunistically spent? However, there were other reasons for Mongolia. You mentioned in your question the swings of policy changes. As I mentioned before, the state used to plan developing mines along with mining towns and infrastructure before 1997, especially during socialist time. Following the advice from donor communities, Mongolia liberalized mineral sector, ultimately to attract more FDI and remove state bureaucracy. First, general public and government officials anticipated that those investors would carry out social issues of local population along with infrastructure development. However, investors such as Sinterra Gold and Ivanhoe of Oyutolga openly rejected it. Also, those national, small, and medium-scale mines did not have such capacity. I mean the social protection. So the social protection of the population in mining impact area is ignored and abandoned. Second, most of these mines and licensed areas were explored during socialist time by Mongolian government fund. Only investments in technologies were needed to run these mines. I mean, it was ready to run. Ironically, individuals and business entities received these deposits free and sold for profits without paying any compensation and taxes until 2006 laws. I call this period as a deposit grabbing, like a land grabbing. Third, mining technology is developing fast and companies exploit minerals in short period of time and leave the country. If cultural transformation is inevitable, Mongolian pastoralists had to face two transformations: adapt to mines and reverse back after mine closure. Do they need this change?
Well, it was not only industrial, large and small Mongolian and foreign companies that participated in this mining boom. Artisanal mining in particular hit international headlines when it was proclaimed that there was a new gold rush in Asia. What economic, technological, and environmental factors pushed the local population to search for gold?
Exactly. Local people also participated in gold rush. I prepared a diagram to show the reason. First, it is about benefit sharing. In Mongolian constitution, subsoil minerals are the property of whole Mongolian people. It does not mean that private people can exploit minerals free, but it tells about benefit sharing through various tools such as taxes, royalties, local development, social protection, building a school, etc. Second, it is about the property. Minerals are sovereign property of nation states and owned by the state worldwide. However, the Western concept of ownership based on local idea of labor makes it complicated. Whoever discovered or explored the mineral in any country have exclusive right over minerals worldwide. What happens if the minerals were explored during the socialist time and the companies took it by license free? Indeed, these minerals belong to Mongolian state at some point. But remember that the companies did not pay the expenses of geological exploration until 2006 law. People demanded justice and assumed those gold deposits as public. Third, most of the artisanal miners worked on tailings in waste dumps and abandoned mine sites. Later stage, artisanal miners started to discover new gold sites based on their skills and information they acquired. This raised the question about the idea of free mining, following John Locke, or inequality, noble savages by Jean-Jacques Rousseau and others. Do artisanal miners have exclusive right over their newly discovered gold sites, or do they have to give it away to the government or the transnational companies? For these reasons, Mongolia's 2006 mineral laws reintroduced the concept of strategic mineral deposit and regulated state ownership of 34%. And it was also followed by windfall tax, banning of mining activities in forest and river basins. On these issues, Oxford University's Gobi Framework Research Project works on two fronts. One is on benefit sharing and other is on the rule of games, such as developing social impact assessment and conflict management.
Extractive industry may bring substantial income, but it is not without considerable environmental risks. Can you tell us more about environmental impacts and other conflicts that have been triggered in Mongolian society?
Yes, I agree that the mining does not come without environmental or social risks. I would also like to add social. It is a vast topic, so let me try to summarize it. First of all, Mongolia suffered a lack of transparency in mining information, such as the size of damaged land area, license holders, and mining beneficiaries, and mining project information. Even taxes paid. Environmental impact assessment reports have never been shared with the public, except for those few more prominent companies. This became fertile soil for corruption, illegal trade of license, and abuse of power. Many high officials, including the head of Mineral Resource Authority, former prime and line ministers, were sentenced in 2010s. If we look at the mining areas in the slide, it covers 4.2% of Mongolia's total territory now. It was 26% in 2004. I mean licensed areas. Under the gold program of Mongolian government, most mined areas were left without technical rehabilitation. The technology was outdated and gold recovery was around 50 to 60% in placer mining. The total size is not counted yet. According to 2016 report of the Ministry of Nature, abandoned mine sites were reported 27,000 hectare land. I doubt this number personally. Second, who will conduct rehabilitation of these abandoned mine sites? Is it artisanal miners who worked on this land after the companies? This question is still not answered yet. Third, most mines are still operational now. Closure of mines and its most significant impacts have not yet come to Mongolia. Water contamination, such as with arsenic, is still not taken seriously. Public is protesting mining companies. Bomach's Dolam's book on Mongolian mining discussed such issues a lot. Last, the companies placed 50% of reclamation expense in the account of local government as a guarantee. The question is, did they calculate it right? Is it enough? Are these funds in the government account?
Artisanal miners, who are colloquially called ninja miners in Mongolia. I know, Byambabaatar, you don't like this name. Ninja miners after the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a television series, which was very popular in the early 1990s. They benefit from the fact that Mongolia is rich in shallow placer gold deposits. But even this sort of relatively minor disruption of the earth is seen by many traditionally minded critics of mining as problematic. Why? Byambabaatar, you as a social anthropologist, you are certainly able to explain why.
Okay, thank you. And it is a great question. I prepared a photo session, and in this session, I will show that the general, that the characteristic of artisan miners. Well, first, name ninja has come from a cartoon Ninja Turtles. Okay, you know it. According to my interlocutors, this name used to represent artisan miners in a good way, such as a heroic figure who resists injustice. It was the symbol of earning their livelihoods. As I have shown in the previous slide, 10,000 people are living on artisanal mining compared to 58,000 in whole mining sector. At its peak, 10,000 people earned money to invest in children's education, building a house, and buying livestock or restocking. However, it became derogatory. When artisanal mining became a boom, it clashed with the value of pastoral way of life. Same time, it experienced many odds and difficulties, such as the involvement of local gangs and uncontrolled social issues. This mainly happened in crowded places, I have to note it. Artisanal miners often work in groups or brigade, and hierarchies emerged among them. It was well documented by researchers such as Mette Hai and Munkerten Kantolak. Second, the government used coercive measures to crash down artisanal mining due to complaints from mining companies and health risk of using mercury in amalgamation of gold. It also coincided with the leakage of cyanide in 2 mining companies. So the government banned the use of mercury, cyanide, and confiscated all mills and sloughs of artisanal miners. Systemic human rights violations and arrests were followed and continued until donor communities and NGOs intervened in the late 2000s. Third, in 2009, artisan miners started to establish official groups and used the name of HAMR, abbreviation of Private Explorers of Minerals. It changed to microminers after the adoption of artisanal mining regulation in 2010.
It is certainly not the individual ninja miners panning gold in Mongolian rivers who are the biggest wrongdoers in the country's broad extractive sector. You are of the opinion that they are in fact used as scapegoats by large mining companies to divert public attention away from the environmental damage the latter cause. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, I am. I hope many people also agree with me on this scapegoating. First of all, artisanal mining is born and intensified during the 1997 free mining law. It is a fact. We have to accept it. As the 2006 law started to assign the responsibility for mining companies on taxes and environmental rehabilitation, some of these companies converted into ninja mining and bought gold from ninja miners cheaper. This conversion was an attempt to avoid taxes and reclamation. Second, when licensing is controlled again, many mining companies directed artisanal miners to the sites with gold occurrence. When gold is explored, mining companies claim the area by taking license. It is the method of kind of prospecting. On the other hand, many companies in the early 2010s have taken the gold sites on the name of rehabilitation. Local government involved, and it was illegal. Finally, gold mining companies accused artisanal miners of environmental damage, diverting public attention while getting favorable law amendments for the interest. For example, blaming gold smuggling on artisanal miners, companies lobbied to decrease gold royalties. Artisanal miners produce 200 kilograms of gold, whereas gold mining companies produce 20,000 kilograms.
Byambabaatar, thank you for sharing your insights with us, and to all of our viewers. Well, if you have questions, please send them to us. Beibei, I'd like to hand over to you now. Let's talk about China. There are many international, Australian, Canadian, and other mining companies active in Mongolia, but this picture wouldn't be complete without China, Mongolia's immediate and resource-hungry neighbor. An important investor, but also a major importer of Mongolian coal. Beibei, why is it so important for China to have access to Mongolian fossil fuels?
Right. Thank you, Emilia. Well, you're right to point out that China is an important trading partner to Mongolia. For the past 10 years, China is always the largest buyer of Mongolia's mineral resources. And in particular for copper and coal, China is often the sole export market for Mongolia's minerals, a market that happens to be just across the border. So, but the border crossing is not always hassle-free. Here's a picture to show that because of the explosive growth in demand from China, but also the bottleneck in road infrastructure, as well as the very long custom procedures, there has been a quite significant, magnificent scene in the South Gobi region in Mongolia, where long lines of trucks loaded with coals are lining up literally for days before they can enter China. So now coming back to your question about why Mongolia's coal is actually important to China, despite the fact that actually China is the world's largest producer for coal, and the majority of its produce is for domestic consumption, of course. There are several factors to be considered. First of all is, of course, the geographical closeness of Mongolia's coal mine deposits. In the South Gobi region, there has several large coal mines that has been under development already. One of them is Tavan Toingo, which is one of the world's largest untapped coking coal deposit. And this mine is only about 240 kilometers away from the Chinese border. And secondly, when it comes to the use of coal, there are generally two different types. So one type is called the thermal coal, which is being used and burned to produce electricity. And this type of coal is quite abundant in China. And also because of the tightening of the environmental regulations, as well as a general trend towards the green energy, so the demand for thermal coal is in decline in China. And the second type is the coking coal, which is a key raw material for producing steels. Actually about 90% of Mongolia's coal export to China is coking coal. This is because Mongolia has a quite high quality of coking coal and also offers quite competitive price. So as a result, over the years, you can see that Mongolia has actually increased its share in China's coking coal import.
The flagship project of the Chinese government, the Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure development strategy adopted in 2013, aims at covering the world with a thick web of China-made or China-sponsored infrastructure. Beibei, to what degree is Mongolia actually targeted by BRI investments, and how many of them are linked to mining?
Yeah. So the Belt and Road Initiative is indeed centered on infrastructure development, and ultimately with the aim to promote trade and economic integration. And there are 6 major economic corridors that has been proposed under the Belt and Road Initiative, one of which is to connect China, Mongolia, and Russia. As you can see from the current map, the yellow colored corridor. Some of them are still under just projection, and some of them are existing. But the Belt and Road Initiative is planning to further upgrade or expand this transport infrastructure project in order to promote trade between China and Mongolia, but eventually through the Russia Trans-Siberia Railway to connect Asia and Europe in a closer network. So in 2016, the three countries, China, Mongolia, and Russia, has reached an agreement to jointly develop this economic corridor. And initially, there is a list of 33 cooperation projects being proposed for consideration and for feasibility studies. A lot of those announced projects are focusing on transportation infrastructure projects. In the context of Mongolia, the focus is to develop some key railway links in this corridor, including the upgrade of the Central Trans-Mongolia Railway, as well as to expand the railway network into the northern and the western part of the country where important mine sites are located. So the infrastructure network is really aiming to connect those major industrial sites and making it easier to transport the key mineral resources from Mongolia to China and to a broader market. And this is also aimed to facilitate the transportation of the cross-border trade by simplifying the custom procedures and making a coordination mechanism in place. There are also quite a few energy projects that are being considered, such as some large-scale coal-fired power plants and also developing power transmission lines. Now, I will also note that actually a lot of the Belt and Road projects proposed in Mongolia is somehow aligned with an earlier national infrastructure strategy developed by the government of Mongolia back in 2014. It is called the Steppe Road, which is a program that calls for massive infrastructure investment in railways, roads, power transmission, and energy pipelines. But very often those mega infrastructure projects, the financing of those projects, as well as the sustainability, often comes under questioning, which I would say is also true to a certain extent to the Belt and Road projects.
Exactly as you said, outdated infrastructure and time-consuming border procedures are blamed for the low level of trade between China, Mongolia, and Russia. Improved infrastructure and simplified border procedures are believed to be the key to changing this. But would this really be a change for the better if one considers all the concomitant environmental risks? What can be done to mitigate them? Beibei, Byamba, what do you think about it?
I would say in a broader sense, large-scale infrastructure projects, if not managed well, may cause long-term sustainability concerns. It is true that for roads and railways, if it cuts through some intact landscape, it will pose threat to the habitat and eventually might cause loss of biodiversity. It might also increase the roadside air pollution and noise pollution. Also, for the energy projects and mining projects that are under the framework of the Belt and Road, they are mostly focused on the coal-fired power plant, which is a high carbon intensity type of energy. And if those plants come into place, this will literally lock Mongolia into a very carbon-intensive development trajectory for the decades to come, and it might also cause issues on the already quite alarming air pollution levels in in the major urban areas in Mongolia, because coal is the major contributor to the local high level of air pollution. So having said that, there are actually quite well established mitigation measures, both at the international level, but also increasingly adopted by industrial players. For example, under the major international environmental laws, there are several conventions that help the government to establish a process that requires a comprehensive and robust environmental impact assessment for all those major large infrastructure projects. Domestically, Mongolia government has also adopted the ERA law, but to what extent those laws are being enforced and implemented, especially for projects that has major environmental risk and concerns, remains to be seen. In terms of industrial practices, I would also note that there are large financial institutions, for example, those multilateral development banks, such as World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, because of their decades of experience in developing infrastructure projects, they have also established a quite high level of environmental and social safeguard policies. So those leading multilateral development banks are enforcing these high environmental standard on the projects they finance. Whether the Chinese banks are also follow suit and adopting a high level of environmental standards, I think is a key question to be addressed. So on the Chinese side, I would say there's still a lot of work to do, but there are also some progress that has been made. For example, in 2018, a group of Chinese banks, many of which are actually the major funder for Belt and Road projects, has been collaborating with some international banks and financiers, and together proposed a green investment principles for Belt and Road projects, basically committing that they will, when financing the Belt and Road projects, they will look to a high international environmental standards for project consideration.
Thank you, Beibei. Sorry for interrupting you. We received a few interesting questions, and I would like to give our viewers a chance to hear what you have to say on certain topics. I guess I would rather start with Byamba in the very moment. So let me just read the questions we got. Can the speaker say something, one of our viewers writes, about the degree to which the Mongolian government is committed to governance of the mining sector rather than the apparent focus on ownership in mining properties by the state?
Well, people often mix these two things. On natural resource extraction, there is a governance issues. Yes, I agree that one. And this is about the rule of game. And on the other hand, the benefit sharing it's not about taking the stake from this mining company's property. It is about the social impact assessment. It is about environmental impact assessments and how these will be integrated with, the joint government and Mongolian local development fund, etc. About that, the governance, yes, the Mongolian government are doing its best. However, it is not enough. I mean that improving this, for example, EITI is in Mongolia and very active extractive industries transparency initiative. And then it is helping. And also many other donor projects are working on improving mining governance at the government level and even also in cooperation with the mines.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another person is asking, is writing, I'd like to hear more about the implementation of conventions and environmental standards. Would you like to say something about it?
Okay, when I conducted my research in Gobi region, the many herders are complaining about the safe passage of animal and wildlife on road and infrastructure. I mean the railroad. For example, Mongolia is building a 415 kilometer long railroad now in the Gobi region, and it has only 12 passages. And in order to go to the passage, the herder has to drive 30 to 40 kilometers. So such things should be reflected in EIA and also in future financing.
Mm-hmm. If you mentioned the word future, I think this would be the right place to move to the last part of our webcast, which is precisely about the future, the way forward. In the Zoï Environment Network report, Greening Mongolia, Beibei, you and your colleagues discuss potential directions of future development. Mongolia has high potential for renewable energies, particularly solar and wind. Do you think that the Mongolian energy sector will indeed expand in this direction? Is this realistic?
So yeah, indeed, actually, the Mongolia government has set out a very ambitious energy target to achieve a minimal share of 30% of renewable energies in their energy mix by 2030. However, if we look closer in another so-called midterm energy program that the government put forward, which envisions major coal energy project development in the course from 2018 to 2023, they are major coal energy projects. And because at the moment it is quite difficult to access financing for coal projects from international banks, World Bank and other multilateral bank has publicly announced that they will stop funding any new coal power plants. So it is likely that those financing of the projects might come from the Chinese investors. On the other hand, if we look at Mongolia, especially in its southern Gobi area, this is a region with large untapped potential for renewable energies, with very favorable conditions to develop wind and solar energy. So I would really say that Mongolia is right now at a crossroads, whether to go as a so-called business as usual mode to continue funding the coal, which will lock the country into a quite carbon intensive trajectory for a few decades, or rather taking this opportunity to seek for a green development solutions, which China could also provide a lot of leading technology, but also financing into the wind and solar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And in the very end, before I say goodbye and thank you for your participation, I would like to turn to Byambabaatar. I would also be interested to hear where you see your country in 10 years' time, based of course on your knowledge of the regional politics, but also technological and other aspects. So what future do you predict?
Well, I'm quite positive person, so I really expect the positive outcomes. As Beibei said, that we are at the crossroad, whether we go to brown or green. Anyway, according to the government long-term plan until 2050, the government wants to have a strong economy, not dependent on commodity price fluctuations through economic diversification. In the shorter term, until 23, it focused on developing mineral sector with responsible mining. My personal opinion is that Mongolia will not escape from mining conflicts or cultural transformation in the near future. If it does not make distributive justice right, for example, local benefits, community development, etc., or reduce transaction costs. I mean, the rule of game should be clear enough. I mean, mainly social impact assessment with the management plan to avoid impacts or ensure community consents and participation in decision making. That's my, the projection of my opinion. Emilia?
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are running short of time now, so I should slowly thank our guests for joining us and all our viewers for your attention. I hope you have enjoyed listening to our discussion on this timely and important topic. Before I say goodbye, I want to encourage you to visit the Asia Society website and find out more about Zoï Environment Network report, about the Gobi framework, which Byambabaatar is working on, and last but not least, about the Zurich-based roadwork project, which deals with the BRI and infrastructural change in Asia, a research project that I have the honor to represent. Thank you, Asia Society, and thank you, everyone. Stay healthy and safe.